23 days, that's how long Kelly Wilkinson had to save her own life. She did everything right, and the system still let her burn to death in her own backyard. 23 days. That is how long Kelly Wilkinson spent trying to save her own life. She told her sisters, she told the police, she obtained a protection order, she created a secret code word with her family so they would know if she was in danger. She did everything a domestic violence victim is told to do. And on the morning of April 20th, 2021, in the backyard of her own home on the Gold Coast of Australia, none of it was enough. This is not just the story of how Kelly Wilkinson died. It is the story of a woman who spent the last month of her life fighting to live. It is the story of a system that had every piece of information it needed to stop what happened to her and still did not. The flames that rose above that fence line on that autumn morning were not just the end of Kelly's life. They were the final failure of a protection system that had been given every opportunity to intervene. Neighbors would later describe hearing a woman screaming for someone to stop. Children were on the property when it happened. One of them ran to a neighbor for help. People grabbed garden hoses. They tried desperately to put out the flames. But it was too late. Kelly died at the scene. She was 27 years old. And as investigators would soon discover, the evidence of what was about to happen had been accumulating for weeks. The warning signs were there. The system had seen them. The system had documented them. And yet, when it mattered most, the system failed to act. By the end of this documentary, you will understand exactly how many chances there were to save Kelly Wilkinson's life, and exactly how many of those chances were missed. Kelly Lee Wilkinson was born into a close-knit family on Queensland's Gold Coast. She was the third of 4 daughters born to Reg and Karen Wilkinson. Her sisters, Danielle, Emma, and Natalie, would later describe her as the kind of child who could keep up with the toughest boys in the neighborhood. She brushed off injuries like they were nothing. She loved motorbikes and adventure. She was the daughter who would come home with scraped knees and a smile on her face, never complaining about the pain. But that toughness lived alongside something softer. Kelly loved dressing up. She loved jewelry. Her favorite color was green. She was, in her family's words, a strong, fierce woman with an enormous heart. She could ride a motorbike through the bush and then come home and spend hours getting ready for a night out. She had this ability to be both tough and tender, to be fearless and gentle at the same time. Her sisters remember her as the one who would stand up for anyone being treated unfairly. She had a fierce sense of justice. Even as a child, she would defend her siblings against bullies. She would speak up when she saw something wrong. She was the kind of person who made friends easily, who drew people toward her with her warmth and her energy, and she was deeply loyal to her family. When her mother passed away in early 2021, it devastated her, but it also seemed to awaken something in her. She started speaking more openly about things she had kept hidden for years. The strength that had always been there was finally turning toward her own survival. In 2011, when Kelly was just 18 years old, she met a man online. His name was Brian Earl Johnston. Johnston was an American, a former United States Marine living in Wayne County, Ohio. His own upbringing had been difficult. His parents separated when he was around 4 years old. He clashed with his stepfather, and he spent long stretches living with his grandparents. He enlisted in the Marine Corps after high school, deployed to Iraq in 2007 and 2009, and was eventually medically discharged in 2010 after being diagnosed with ADHD and depression. Kelly and Brian's online relationship moved fast. In December of 2011, Kelly flew from Australia to Ohio to meet him in person for the first time. Within a month, they were married. Kelly, still a teenager, uprooted her life and moved to the United States to build a life with a man she had known for barely a few weeks in person. It is worth pausing on just how enormous that leap was. An 18-year-old girl from the Gold Coast, leaving her parents, her sisters, everything familiar, to marry a Marine she had met on the internet. In a small town in Ohio she had never even visited before that December. The couple had 2 children together while living in Ohio. And for years from the outside, they looked like an ordinary young family building a life together, thousands of miles from where Kelly had grown up. But by around 2016 and into early 2017, cracks were showing. Kelly was unhappy. Something was wrong in the marriage, something she had not yet fully revealed to her family back home. She was isolated, far from everyone who loved her, and the man she had married was changing. In early 2017, Kelly made the decision to leave. She returned to Australia with her 2 children. Johnston did not take the separation well. In messages he later sent to Kelly's brother-in-law, Johnston admitted that while drinking, he had burned boxes of Kelly's and the children's belongings, including Kelly's wedding dress. He wrote that he enjoyed destroying things when he was angry and had been drinking. A few months later, Johnston showed up unannounced at the home of Kelly's parents on the Gold Coast. He told Kelly he had sold everything he owned in America, that he had nowhere else to go, and that staying in Australia near his children depended entirely on getting back together with her. Kelly, according to her family, had not wanted to reconcile. She had been relieved to be home. She had been rebuilding her life. But Johnston was persistent. He was persuasive, and he used the children as leverage. If he could not stay in Australia, he would have to return to America, and the children would be far away from their father. Kelly felt trapped. She agreed to try again. The couple got back together, had a 3rd child, and settled into family life in Queensland. From the outside, it might have looked like a fresh start, a new country, a new beginning. But what Kelly's family did not know yet was the full extent of what was happening behind closed doors. The control had not stopped. It had only intensified. Johnston dictated what Kelly wore. He controlled how she styled her hair. He prevented her from getting a driver's license. He stopped her from working. He kept her financially dependent on him, and he isolated her from the people who could have helped her. Years of alleged physical, emotional, and financial control. That is what Kelly was living with. She would later tell relatives that Johnston dictated what she wore and how she styled her hair. She said he prevented her from getting a driver's license and from working, keeping her financially dependent on him. She described being held down, threatened, having doors slammed in her face. She believed at times that she was being watched, possibly even followed by a private investigator Johnston may have hired. To the outside world, Kelly was simply a young mom, raising 3 kids on the Gold Coast. To Kelly, according to what she would later tell her sisters, home had quietly become the most dangerous place she knew. And she was hiding that reality from almost everyone around her, including for years her own parents. She was ashamed. She was afraid. She believed that if she told anyone, Johnston would find out and things would get worse. She protected him. She made excuses for him. She told herself that if she just tried harder, if she just kept the peace, things would get better. But they never did. In early 2021, tragedy struck the Wilkinson family. Kelly's mother, Karen, suffered a sudden, fatal brain aneurysm. She was 55 years old. In the hospital, as the family absorbed the news that Karen was not going to survive, something shifted in Kelly. In a hospital elevator, she turned to her sister Danielle and told her she wanted someone to know what had been happening in her marriage. She was afraid something might happen to her. That sentence would become one of the most haunting pieces of testimony in this entire case. Over the following weeks, as the family grieved Karen's death, Kelly began opening up to her sisters during long conversations after school drop-off. She always avoided text messages because she feared Johnston might see them. She told Danielle about alleged incidents from February of 2021, allegations that would later form the basis of 4 separate rape charges against Johnston, charges he has disputed and which remain a separate legal matter to this day. Kelly reportedly told her sister that during one incident, she screamed and fought back, telling him to stop. By February 2021, Kelly had made her decision. She told her family Johnston was abusive and controlling, and she told him directly that she would no longer protect him and that he needed to leave. Danielle would later testify that in those weeks, she believed her sister was growing stronger as a person, more determined, more herself. What followed was a rapid and increasingly desperate sequence of events. On March 28, 2021, it was actually Johnston who first contacted police, apparently anticipating that Kelly might accuse him of rape. When officers spoke with Kelly, the focus shifted immediately. She was identified as the person at risk. Within days, both the Gold Coast Domestic Violence Prevention Center and Queensland Police had flagged Kelly's case as high risk. A temporary protection order was put in place, restricting Johnston from coming within 100 meters of her. But a high-risk flag on paper does not automatically translate into safety. When Senior Constable Julian O'Rourke later assessed Kelly's situation, he rated her as only medium risk, not high. Why the discrepancy? He would later testify that the police tablet he was using could not open the PDF containing the Domestic Violence Center's high-risk assessment. The information existed. It just never reached the officer who needed it. In early April, Kelly reported that Johnston was allegedly using a third party to get around the protection order and contact her about his belongings and the children. It was treated in part as a technical breach, a lower priority matter. The officers assessing the priority of her complaint, it later emerged, may not have even seen that Kelly had already been classified as high-risk days earlier. The label existed in the system. It simply was not traveling with her file to the people making decisions about what to do next. Then came April 11th, 2021, arguably the most consequential day before Kelly's murder. That morning, Johnston was formally charged at Southport Police Station with 4 counts of rape relating to the incidents Kelly had described from February. Given the nature of the charges, Johnston should have been held and brought before a magistrate to argue for bail. Instead, a detective sergeant granted him station bail on the spot. A decision an inquest would later hear was contrary to the Bail Act and reportedly not an isolated practice at that station. That same day, Kelly went to not one, but 2 police stations, Runaway Bay and then Southport. She was trying to report what she believed were further breaches of her protection order. Because she had already reported at one station, an officer wrote in an internal note that Kelly appeared to be, in her words, cop shopping to get the outcome she wanted. The incident was also incorrectly logged as a routine street check rather than a domestic violence matter requiring specialist follow-up. This meant it was far less likely to ever reach the officers trained to assess her danger. Around the same time, the Domestic Violence Prevention Center raised concerns directly with police about how Kelly's case was being handled. An officer reviewed the complaint and reported back that she had found no problems, that existing procedures had been followed, and that if Kelly was unhappy, she could file a formal complaint. That review happened roughly 1 week before Johnston killed her. According to Kelly's family, 4 days before her murder, on April 16, 2021, Kelly's sister drove her to Southport Police Station one more time. Kelly was carrying printed messages, evidence she believed supported her claims. Her sister waited in the car. Minutes later, Kelly came back out. She said the person at the front counter had essentially told her to cool off and give Brian a break. A domestic violence specialist was reportedly inside that same station that day, expecting Kelly to come in. But Kelly never made it far enough to meet with her. No police record of this visit exists. Kelly had grown so afraid that she and her family had created a code phrase. If she ever texted the family group chat the words, "I'm considering moving back to Ohio," they would know she was in serious danger and needed help immediately. She never got the chance to send it. In the days before April 20th, Johnston's own behavior was escalating. He was calling and messaging Kelly's brother-in-law, Reese Carroll, obsessively, sometimes multiple times a day. Reese would later describe him as unraveling. Johnston talked about suicide. He asked someone if anything happened to him, to tell people he had been a good person. The night before the murder, he told his mother that his lawyer had warned him he might be remanded in custody when the rape case returned to court. That same night, Johnston enlisted a younger co-worker, Bradley Bell, to drive him. Bell drove Johnston past Kelly's home once that evening, and again in the early hours of the following morning. Along the way, they stopped. A 20-liter jerry can was filled with petrol. Johnston took it with him when Bell dropped him near Kelly Street. CCTV footage would later show Johnston assembling a bag containing duct tape, zip ties, a hatchet-style weapon, dark clothing, a face covering, and a white powder later identified as a sedating substance. He was preparing for something terrible. In the early morning of April 20th, 2021, Brian Johnston made his way onto or toward Kelly's property in Arundel and waited. When Kelly came into the backyard, he attacked her. He stabbed her multiple times, roughly 8 wounds in total, before dousing her in petrol and setting her on fire. Neighbors heard a woman screaming for him to stop. Flames rose above the fence line. Kelly's children were on the property when it happened. One of them ran to a neighbor for help. Neighbors rushed over, some grabbing a garden hose, desperately trying to put the flames out. It was too late. Kelly died at the scene. She was 27 years old. Johnston himself caught fire in the attack. He jumped into the family's pool, then fled on foot. Police searched the area, and a police dog eventually located him nearby. He was suffering severe burns and injuries consistent with an attempt to take his own life. He was rushed to hospital and placed in an induced coma. When he regained consciousness, he was formally charged with Kelly's murder. The investigation that followed uncovered the extent of Johnston's premeditation. The petrol, the weapon, the restraints, the sedatives, all gathered the night before. In July 2021, Bradley Bell was arrested and charged with murder as well, on the theory that he had known what Johnston intended and had knowingly helped him carry it out. The case moved through the courts for nearly 3 years. Johnston initially planned to fight the murder charge at trial, but in February 2024, about a month before that trial was set to begin, he changed course and pleaded guilty to murdering Kelly Wilkinson. On March 13, 2024, Justice Peter Applegarth of the Queensland Supreme Court sentenced Johnston. Under Queensland law, murder carries a mandatory life sentence. That is what Johnston received, along with a concurrent 3-year sentence for breaching the domestic violence order protecting Kelly. The judge described the killing as an extreme act of domestic violence. He directly rejected any notion that Kelly had belonged to Johnston or that he had had any right to control her. The court found Johnston had planned to kill Kelly and then take his own life, and that his own attempt to die had failed. Bradley Bell's case went to trial separately in September 2024. During that trial, Johnston himself took the stand and testified that he had never told Bell he intended to kill Kelly. Bell admitted to driving Johnston and helping obtain the petrol, but he told the jury he had no idea Johnston planned to murder her. He said an earlier statement to detectives in which he had suggested he knew Johnston intended to tie Kelly up and burn her had been a lie, born out of fear that cooperating with police would protect him. After less than 6 hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted Bradley Bell of both murder and manslaughter. He walked free after more than 3 years in custody awaiting trial. The separate rape case against Johnston, covering the 4 alleged incidents from February 2021, continued through the courts independently. By late 2025, a judge had ruled that a statement Kelly herself gave before her death describing the alleged assaults could be admitted as evidence, despite her obviously being unavailable for cross-examination. In November 2025, Johnston dismissed his legal team from prison and indicated he wanted the trial moved and possibly heard by a judge alone rather than a jury, further delaying resolution of those charges. Then in March 2026, a coronial inquest opened in Southport to examine exactly how Queensland police had handled Kelly's case in the weeks before her death. Senior officers testified one by one, acknowledging missed opportunities. The coroner adjourned the inquest to investigate a new allegation about the April 16th visit. As of today, the Queensland Coroner's Court still lists Kelly Wilkinson's inquest as adjourned with no final findings yet released. Her sister, Danielle, now runs the Kelly Wilkinson Foundation, supporting children and families left behind after domestic violence homicide. She did everything she was supposed to do. The system failed. The fight to change it continues.